Okay, up here I can really not see anybody. Welcome everybody. I can't believe how bright that light is. For those of you who don't know about Untitled, obviously this is our fourth issue. We're bringing out 2 a year. So obviously we've been going for 2 years. I have to say there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes with this. Everyone that works on this is doing it for nothing, but I'm very proud to say that we are actually paying authors for the first time this issue. So yes. This was the main reason why we started this up, because Les and I are writers ourselves, and we were complaining about how hard it is for new writers to have their stories published. So this is why we've started it up. And obviously paying writers is really a big deal for us, and it's really great to be able to do that. Next thing is to be able to pay ourselves. But also this issue was made even more possible because of funding that we received from Arts Victoria. So I don't know if there's anyone here tonight from Arts Victoria. I did invite them, but I haven't heard if anyone was coming or not. But that actually made a really big difference because it paid for the printing, which means that when the money comes in from this, instead of just going into the net to pay for printing each time, which is what's been happening, it actually means that we can still pay writers and then hopefully pay ourselves, and it'll just keep growing, which is great. So I'm going to do all my thank yous at the end. So I'd like to introduce Arnold to you. Arnold is going to launch Untitled for us tonight. I think Arnold is well known enough around Melbourne that he doesn't really need an introduction. And he's a good talker, so I'm not going to talk too much because I'm going to let him talk, because he's very passionate about stories, which is very important. I mean, Melbourne is a great city for writing anyway, and the great thing about Arnold is he's very passionate about stories. So if anyone has ever been to a workshop with Arnold or anywhere where he's talking about writing, it's impossible not to get inspired and want to go back to your own writing. So can you all make welcome Arnold? Thank you.
Hello everyone. Apologies first, I'm on the run. You can't time these things, and by a strange coincidence, tomorrow, I was asked to do this a while ago. Blaise is an amazing organiser. Gee, she is so well organised, and she does it all so well, and she's very persuasive. And so I agreed to do this. But tomorrow, my next book has to be ready for the typesetters, so I'm going home to work. There's one story there's a book of stories actually, and one story is not quite working, and it's on your mind, until you cross the last I and dot the last T, something like that. Anyway, there's another reason that I'm on the run, and that is because just before I came here, I went somewhere else. I just had to go to this other place. Right? They're having this amazing evening, and once again, I wasn't to know. This evening is taking place at the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre in West Melbourne, and what the evening is a celebration of this project that I was involved in, and it's a project that led to a play called Not Just My Story. Now, this play was shown over the weekend. It was a play put on by asylum seekers. They come from Eritrea, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Iraq, India, Pakistan, the Congo, Nigeria, Kurdistan, Turkey, among other countries. And for several months they've been rehearsing with this amazing director, Catherine Simmons. And these are guys that, not all of them, but most of them have never been on stage before. English is their second, third or fourth language. They are, quite a few of them, traumatised. And the way we work with them is that my job was to come in and run workshops to get them to write stories. But what we did was we kind of said things like, where do you feel safe? And, so there was all kinds of different things we did before, we got into that, the drama of it all. And they did beautiful stuff. And then they workshopped. They had fantastic professionals working with them. And what they did was absolutely overwhelming. I mean, this is what story's all about. I only wish I could get Tony Abbott, kidnap him, tie him up, sit him down in a chair, tie him to the chair, the good Christian that he is, and lock his ankles in and his arms in so he can't get away, and get matchsticks so he doesn't close his eyes, and get him to watch. It would change his life. Maybe he'd become a true Christian. The stories are extraordinary. But what's more important is that they look you in the eye and they're telling you a story. You can't run away. You can't see them as just a horde of people, which is the way a lot of our politicians want to see them. You see them as individuals. And the power of this story is what storytelling is all about. They take us to other places and they can transform our understanding and create the most important thing that I think a writer can create, and that is empathy for other ways of seeing things, other ways of journeying through life. It was just so overwhelming. And so I thought, well, at 6 o'clock the celebration began. I thought, well, at least I can go there for half an hour and give everyone a big hug and say thank you for allowing me to be part of this process. And out of all of this, it comes down to this thing about understanding what the word author really means. I mean, author comes from the word authority, and an author is actually an authority on their story. The author is in the driver's seat. It's very empowering to write. And I believe in a non-elitist approach to writing. We've all got stories to tell. Carl Jung said, we've all got stories to tell, and not to tell them can lead to despair. And we've all got stories to tell. And I think it should be a democratic art form. And I think a book like Untitled, or a collection or journal like Untitled, fits the bill brilliantly. This is I think it's about the third edition that I've read through. I got it on Tuesday, so I wasn't able to read all the stories. I did read, of course, all the stories that were judged in the competition, and I'll come to that in a moment. But there's, in my view, a quantum leap in the standard of the stories. And I'm not quite sure why, but it's very striking, the rise in the quality of the stories. But before I come to that, there's a few little things. It's the little things. I just love the size of it. I was able to read quite a few of the stories on the train, and it's very mobile. We've got to be savvy these days, because the iPad and all these other forms, the e-book, are going to be more and more a major form of reading, and so it's great to have this format. But what's more important is that you can tell by reading the stories and by looking at the bios at the end what the real purpose of Untitled is. It's an outlet that is enabling people to be published that possibly could not find an outlet. There's not enough outlets. And as far as I understand the literary scene, it's a very strange one. Like, you'll have these magazines like Meanjin and Overland and Westerly and Southerly, but there's a tendency to be, they're great publications and they played a great role in the Australian literary culture, but there's something a little bit precious about them. And when you read the stories here, you can see, wow, there's energy. There's a lot of energy in these stories. These are voices that are coming, forcing their way up. They're there's a very youthful energy about the stories. Some of the stories I read are amazing, and I haven't had time to read them all, so if I've left out your story, and also time-wise, but I just wanted to mention a couple. The 10 Count by Danny Ryder. about a boxer. It's just a great story. You can see this as someone that can write a novel. And then Drought Days Are Over by Gillian Staton just takes us to the heart of something that's going on in rural Australia in a very dramatic way. The Pornographer, Ryan O'Neill, very, very clever story, very sexy story. Pterodactyls by Dave Halliday is, look, I was laughing. I was bent over double. I wanted more. It's a very funny story. It's a very daring story too. I loved that story. Can I put my name to it? No. A Guest for Dinner, another lovely story. That one's a very empathetic story. That's written by Deborah Sheldon. Now, Objects of My Affection by Lana Rosenbaum is an amazing story. Gee. I mean, the Middle East conflict. Yeah. What a drama. But what bullshit is often talked about the Middle East conflict. You know, people say black, white, this, that. Life isn't like that. I mean, the tragedy of that story is you've got two very powerful conflicting narratives, right? You've got two strong stories head on, right, driven by passion and all kinds of mythologies and claims. And it's not an easy answer to it. And anyone thinks that they're going to have the answer by waving one flag or the other. It's not like that. And what I loved about this story is that it just took you to the heart of, okay, in this case, what it is to be an Israeli soldier. And you could have had a parallel story of what it is to be a Palestinian freedom fighter and put them together. And maybe by putting them together, we start to see some way forward. You start to see the common thread, which is it's just horrific to have to go and fight for your rights, whatever way you see your rights. And that story really is quite shattering. And I think that Lana, I'm not sure if you're here tonight, but you know, keep writing this sort of story. We need to hear them. Now, I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned other stories. I just didn't have the time to read them all. But now it's my pleasure to, well, first of all, just finishing with Untitled. Congratulations, Les, Blaise, everyone that's taken part in it. The magazine, it's getting better. I think it's got a unique character of its own, and I hope it continues to grow. And I'm very, very... And finally, the final thing I want to say is, when I read these stories, I thought, gee, I can learn. I can learn from these guys. You know, if there's one word that summarises the stories, it's daring. You know, sometimes the older you get, you can start losing a bit of that daring. You start to think, oh, someone's looking over my shoulder. I better watch it. But here, it kind of like it frees you up reading these stories. So thank you very much for leading me to them and creating the space, and to do it free of charge. Well, I think that speaks for itself. And now, the drum roll, right? What we're going to do is, there is a lovely, it's a bit like, you know, those magazines, and you've got those parts that are like sectioned off. In here, there's this grey bit, which is the stories of the short story competition. I got a short list of about 10 stories. I loved reading them, and I think 3 of the people are here. So look, because we're running short of time, I'll read what I wrote about the stories that we're going to hand out the certificates for. Now, but I'll mention the others. Highly commended, Mother-in-Law and Order by Harold Malley, and the third place together was Josh Donnellan with Showtime, both great stories. But the 3 that are here tonight, first of all, highly commended, and I'll read what I said, The Male Role Model by Mieta Rien, I think it's right. Is Mieta here? Right, come up, and we'll embarrass you. And what I wrote was an engaging story with credible characters. Uncle Larry, in particular, is beautifully drawn. He's a beautiful character, Uncle Larry. As to the young narrator, written with an ear for authentic dialogue, the story is very well structured with some interesting and unexpected twists in the narrative. the most outstanding aspect of the story is the relationship between the uncle and nephew, depicted without sentimentality, yet deeply moving nevertheless. So, good on you. Congratulations. Thanks. And now, Equal First. You just couldn't compare the stories. These two stories were both rippers, really outstanding, but very, very different. So Equal First of all, He Should Have Died Hereafter by Anja Tanhane, is that right? So step up. This is interesting. This story hit me on a personal level because a couple of years ago I was very lucky not I was knocked over by as a pedestrian, and I was very lucky not to be in the situation that Anja writes about. So this is what I said. This is an extraordinary story with a deep ring of truth. The tragedy and human costs of acquired brain injuries is written from the point of view of the mother. The narrative builds in intensity to a sharp, ferocious, but credible twist in the end. The tragedy is explored without sentimentality and with an ear for dialogue and an eye for telling detail. The author is acutely aware of the scenes unfolding around them. At the heart of this powerful story is an exploration of the maternal instinct, the primal pain experienced by a mother for a deeply wounded loved one. This is how it is with acquired brain injuries, and the author does not pull any punches while remaining true to the art of story. So good on you. Congratulations. It's an amazing story. And also amazing, Equal First, is Avery at the River by Samantha-Ellen Bound. Are you here? Now, this story is another treat. It was a treat to read it. This is a beautifully written story. It flows like a dream. The narrative pace and rhythm are superb. The two principal characters are written with great verve. The voices and dialogue are distinct and sustained throughout. The tone in the writing and the voices of the principal characters reminded me of the way the child characters are depicted in classics such as To Kill a Mockingbird and Catcher in the Rye. The tension is sustained and builds to a strong climax. The result is a nuanced and moving story which suggests how easily youthful bravado can be transformed into tragedy. So, congratulations. So thank you very much. And I'm going to sneak away. I'd love to stay for the readings, but I just can't. And keep writing. It's a lonely profession, but then every now and then you get out there and you see your name in print, and it's very exciting. And it's a gift that you share with other people. Thank you.
The torture of standing up here while your own story is being talked about. I love it. Okay, we're going to have some readings now. We're going to start with George Ivanoff. I cannot see where you are, George. Come up here.
Hello. I'm going to read the first 2 and a bit pages from my story, Tall, Dark and Handsome. It's interesting the way short stories go. They don't always turn out how you expect them to, and you never really know whether they're going to work or not when you first start on them. This story, when I originally first wrote it, was written from the point of view of a woman who has an encounter with a tall, dark and handsome stranger, and it didn't work. It was flat, and it was just a bit ordinary, and it was a bit blah. And I struggled over it for ages, and I was just at that point of just chucking it out and saying this isn't worth it when it suddenly struck me. And I changed the woman to a man, but left the encounter as it was, and suddenly I had something. And I went with that and rewrote it a little bit, and finally ended up with something I was actually quite happy with. So first 2 and a bit pages of Tall, Dark and Handsome. I was browsing through the paranormal romance section of a quaint little bookstore. You know, the sort, quiet and arty and secreted down a side street that hardly anyone ever finds, when he bumped into me. Now, I know this is going to sound like I'm spouting cliches, but he was tall, dark and handsome. Honestly, he was. Tall, dark and breathtakingly handsome. And European, I'm sure. Perhaps a hint of the Middle East. He wore an expensive-looking suit, the top 3 buttons of his apricot form-hugging shirt unbuttoned. I beg your pardon, dear fellow, was all he said, inclining his head in a slight bow. His voice was so gentle, yet resonating with inherent power, confident and self-assured, obviously a man who got what he wanted. There was a hint of an accent, and his pronunciation was too perfect, confirming my assumption of his foreign status. Our eyes met only briefly, but my knees weakened, and I found myself falling into those crystal blue pools. But then he was gone, around the bookshelf and out of my field of vision, perhaps out of my life. It took me a moment to regain my senses before I realised that I had to talk to this stranger. Had to! Even if my chances with him amounted to a big fat zero, and I knew that they probably would, I could at least hear his voice one more time, perhaps even get him to say my name. I hurried round to the other side of the shelf, trying to look like I was interested in the books, which, of course, were now the furthest thing from my mind. But he wasn't there. I surmised that he must have moved further down the shop, towards the beaten-up old sofas that people who didn't like paying for books sat in, bending the covers of crappy novels that other people would end up purchasing. I ever so casually raced to the back of the store, peering down the aisles as I went. Reaching the far wall, I was bitterly disappointed to discover a black-clad teenager with way too much makeup, halfway through twilight. I had a momentary urge to rip the book from her grasp and yell at her that it was trash! But more important things clamoured for attention in my mind. My mystery man was nowhere to be seen. I went from disappointment to devastation. Is that too strong a word for this situation? Am I being a drama queen? Looking around frantically, I caught a glimpse of him at the front counter, passing a book to the sales assistant. And then another damn book browser blocked my line of vision. Didn't these people have better things to do than waste their time, and mine, browsing books in a bookstore? Hurriedly, without really looking at titles, I grabbed a book from the nearest shelf and rushed to the counter, accidentally bumping into him, my chest briefly coming into contact with his back, my groin with his firm buttocks. That contact provided me with much inspiration for my imagination in weeks to come, I can tell you. I'm sorry, I managed to stammer, stepping back and almost falling over. That's quite all right, he answered. And an elderly lady behind the counter handed him his change and his book. No harm done. So you're a Shakespeare fan, I blurted out, as I saw his newly acquired book bore the title Much Ado About Nothing. That I am, he answered, smiling warmly. And you? What are you reading? I held up the complete book of pregnancy, inwardly screaming as I took in the title. Of all the books I could have picked up, I chose the one most likely to give the wrong impression. My man was no longer smiling. Was that a look of disappointment on his face? I'm not pregnant, I blathered. Obviously, I'm a man. And I've certainly not impregnated anyone. What I'm trying to say is, this book isn't for me. It's for a friend. A platonic friend. He raised an eyebrow into a perfect little arch. A platonic pregnant friend impregnated by someone other than me. It was at this point that I wished for the ground to crack open and swallow me. Thank you. And just a quick little bit of self-promotion. My teen novel Gamer's Quest is available for sale out there, and there are promotional cards for the sequel coming out in September. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, George. Can I just say that George is a really good advocate for other people's writing as well. He does promote himself, obviously, but he's been to every Untitled launch. He launched the second issue as well. But I think what we have to remember that to be a writer, we have to be aware that we have to support all writers, and we have to actually buy books and read them. We have to be big readers in order to keep the physical book alive. That's my little lecture for the night. Do we have Gillian Staton here? I don't know if she's made it or not. I haven't seen her. Nope. Okay. Dave Halliday. I know Dave's here. Can you come up?
Great.
Bright out of you.
Thanks. It is.
Is that enough?
Yeah. All right. Hey, everyone. This is a breakup story, and it's about dinosaurs. I'm going to read skip the first couple of pages and read the... Okay. Last couple of pages. It's about pterodactyls. It's called Pterodactyls. And subtitle is, "They swooped from the heavens on a quietly unassuming autumn day in New York. And did Tommy Lee Jones save us? Could he?" All right. It was only when a pterodactyl interrupted Woody Allen's clarinet performance one Monday night at a Carlisle hotel on East 76th Street that things took a turn for the worse. Sitting in the audience was none other than Tommy Lee Jones, listening to Woody's exploration of sound as he routinely did every Monday. A brief word about Tommy Lee Jones. Actor Tommy Lee Jones loathed being disturbed from any of his few pleasures in life and had long since viewed other humans as elusive and disappointed. Very separate from himself. Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people." No one believed this more than Tommy Lee. They were disheartening and disgusting, something which held once great potential for development but has since proved a dismal failure. This had not always been the case, however. When Tommy Lee was a boy, his dreams varied little from those of every other child growing up in the 50s. He dreamed of hovering cars, bubble houses in the sky, lunar cities, laser ray guns, robot servants and moving walkways. It was in this idealised future that the young Tommy Lee Jones intended on living out most of his adult life as a sheriff or US Marshal, something really tough, on the outer fringes of space where lawlessness was rampant and the district attorney wasn't watching over his shoulder. He would deal with intergalactic criminals in a manner he saw fit, which was with a merciless iron fist. But as he lived through decade after dreaming decade, his future space world never eventuated. Jones held the frailty and stupidity of the human race as directly responsible. Human disenchantment had disenchanted him, and now the task fell to him to disenchant others through the art and beauty of acting. In the midst of one of Tommy Lee Jones's favourite reveries at the Carlisle Hotel, where he dreamed a post-apocalyptic world where he and Woody Allen were the last remaining people, and all they had to survive on was their wits, hardness of character, and Woody's clarinet music, a pterodactyl blindly and mindlessly burst through the doors of the Carlisle Auditorium. Its blank bird eye was locked wide open in permanent panic, constantly surprised as all birds are surprised. Tommy Lee Jones had had enough. This bizarre tolerance by the state and city of New York had led to the crime of him being nudged from one of his few minutes of pleasure. At the flapping and clanging of the doors, Woody Allen kept playing, never faltering. His watertight professionalism was never called into account. His eyes were closed and his fingers ran along the keys of the clarinet like worn buttons of a remote control. He flicked through the channels of the tune expertly, ignoring the ambient noise of the interrupting pterodactyl. The pterodactyl, hearing something enchanting and attractive in the music, and still driven by the unnameable smell of unplaceable desire, thought the bird call of Woody Allen's clarinet was what he'd been searching for, nay, what he had been created for. This was surely the sound of its love in song. This was what had been called out of the chaos of 1 trillion years of non-existence. In these beautiful notes, the long-skulled creature found its god. The giant-winged reptile unleashed its most powerful screech of worship, temporarily rising above its stasis of confusion and inability to explain or rationalise anything in the world. The tuxedoed crowd heard the screech in the key of terror. Only in New York is the appearance of a dinosaur at a Monday night performance on East 76th Street less thrilling. No one hit the fire alarm, and with the addition of a dinosaur to reality, not much time was wasted with incredulity. How quickly one adapts, how quickly life changes. Well, this is my life now, Woody Allen muttered to himself as he unhurriedly walked off the stage. The presence of dinosaurs is adapted to remarkably easily. Alone, Tommy Lee Jones sat still, his hands closeted in darkness. He had long since given up cracking his knuckles due to arthritis. But he did it once again now, cracking the thumb of his left hand. In this small action lay all the clues to the steadfastness of his metallic determination. The crowd vanished through the exits, pressing and crushing like prairie animals stampeding to water, arms before their chests, pressing and pushing those ahead, former friends who were now dead weight. In the stage wings, Woody Allen stood before a ladder that led to the upper platform suspended above the stage. He had a profound fear of heights, but an equally profound love of ladders. It was the latter, which enabled him to climb to the lightning platform above the stage so he could see everything below. The pterodactyl sat on the stage, scratching itself with its stupidly long beak, and looked about the auditorium turned cave with its big blank eyes of endless surprise. It knew nothing of where it was or what brought it there. Woody Allen saw the primeval beast as more infant than villain, more socially awkward nerd than jock, more Richie Cunningham than the Fonz. It was somehow less remarkable than all it had been made out to be. He saw it as little more than a spirited loaf of bread, like a fly, animated for a moment, then forgetful of its aliveness. What Woody Allen did not see was its love, its unyielding, unknowing and unmistakable love. Tommy Lee Jones's fingers worked lightly and harmoniously around the handle of a matte black Glock 9mm he wore under his dinner jacket. A brief word about Tommy Lee Jones's Glock 9mm. It seems a little bit too convenient, doesn't it? Seems like a deus ex machina, that this might even be possible, let alone probable. But next time you see Tommy Lee Jones, look in those millennia-age eyes of flint, those eyes of hard jungle wisdom that reach far back before time was conceptually initiated. For a moment, just dare to wonder whether he isn't packing heat. Woody Allen watched Tommy Lee Jones walk downstairs in a rolling gait, the exact same way he would walk to fetch a Samuel Adams in the fridge in his Upper West Side apartment. Woody Allen had Netflix and was familiar with all of Mr. Jones's work, but he'd never seen the man in any of his roles channel such cool fierceness, such titanium solidarity. The dwarfish figure of Jones approached the stage without hurry or hesitation. The sheen of his boots glowed under the orange stage lights. Every wrinkle on his face had a shadow. The minds of people are rarely focused on what they're doing at any given moment. Our minds give us the ability to exist outside our bodies at all times. With pterodactyls, life is exactly the opposite. The clarinet music of love was over, but the scent that had dominated all impulses remained. The pterodactyl felt that it was more alone than it was 15 minutes before, but the deep longing was still there. The polished wood of the stage creaked as Tommy Lee Jones stepped up. Woody Allen watched as the pterodactyl ignored its new visitor, stretched out its wings like an old French monoplane. And Tommy Lee Jones, like an ancient emperor, like a decorated general of all of history's armies, surveyed the creature with heavily lidded eyes. Woody Allen saw not an actor, but Robert E. Lee standing before the Gettysburg dawn. General Tommy Lee Jones ambled over and drew his weapon. The pterodactyl recognized the smell of his guest as being the smell of something he loved without reason, a new visitor on the stage, which was now his life and universe. The prehistoric beast was trapped so insufferably in the present that each moment was brand new, like a birth. It lifted its beak to Tommy Lee. The actor stood meters away with the Glock by his side, pointed to the floor. The pterodactyl clambered towards Tommy Lee with its claws in its wings stabbing heavily into the stage. It looked like a giant sagging capital M. Slowly it lifted its sharp muzzle and brushed it against Tommy Lee Jones's left arm. It was then that the creature felt something akin to what we know as happiness. The actor placed his palm up against the colossal beak, pressing the flesh of his grizzled hand against the face of the dinosaur. It felt cold, more like a seashell. The actor held his hand there, in benediction, a symbol of man's illusory and temporal dominance over beasts. They stood like that in the glare of the lights, making solemn and secret promises to one another that may never be tamed enough for language or voice. The pterodactyl breathed in Tommy Lee Jones and worshipped him there in the moment, loving him in all the completion a true love may offer. But for some loves, the timing is all wrong. Tommy Lee Jones closed his eyes and with a heart full of sorrow, placed the muzzle of the Glock against where he estimated the location of the brain was. Some creatures, some sad, sad creatures, were only ever born for the moment of their death. Some were indeed born to endless night. Woody Allen watched as Tommy Lee Jones stood with one hand caressing the creature's beak, the other pressing the gun against its long head. In the stage lights and anonymous darkness of the amphitheatre, he watched as Tommy Lee Jones squeezed the trigger. I think I might stop it right there.
Thanks, Dave. Lana, is Lana here? Lana Rosenbaum? No. Rin Collins? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. No. They were meant to be here. Okay, we're going to have some of the competition winners read then. This is the first time we've run a competition. Sorry, can everyone hear me? Yep. This is the first time we've run a competition. When we decided to run it, we thought, we might get 80 to 100 entries. We actually got just under 200. So when it came time to reading them, we were a little bit worried. So there was 3 readers, initial readers. That was Les Zigomanis, Bo Hillier and I. And we reduced it down to the 10 that Arnold judged. So we have Anja and Mieta, and I think Samantha can read. Did you want to read? Okay. Again? It's up to you. Anyway, we'll start with Anja, if you'd like to come up and have a read. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear? Yeah. So like Arnold said, this is a story about a mother who visits her son in a hospital, and it's so her son is 17 years old, and a year before the story takes place, he was a victim of an assault and suffered a severe brain injury. So he was left very disabled, so he's in a wheelchair, he can't talk, he can't walk, he can't eat, so he's just got a tube to the stomach. And this is, where I'm reading, it's about halfway through. All the teenage angst was gone, his anger at her, which he'd never really understood. Now he seemed to like it when she stroked his forehead and sang him made-up songs. It was all gone. His anger, the unexpected moments of sweetness, playing tennis, a sudden interest in studying physics, secretly watching porn on the internet, his electric guitar, the band at school, a few early dates with a girl from his class. Chiara, her name was, or something like that. The girl had come to the hospital every day at first, swore she'd do anything for him and never abandon him. It was she who'd found Stephen on the pavement in a pool of blood, not far from the nightclub. For 2 weeks she'd purged, slender and lithe, on his bed in the ICU, intense and amazed to find herself in the middle of such a tragedy. It now was 11.5 months since her last visit. No doubt she was distracted by boys who could walk, talk, and remember her. Had they kissed, made out, made love? She hoped so, for his sake. She hoped those lips, which had once smiled happily and sardonically, which now were drooping saliva. She hoped those lips had known the joys of the first kiss, the fantastic passion of young love. She wanted to hold him like a baby, to rock him all day and make it good again. She'd been patient with Stephen when he was born, walking up and down with him in her arms for hours when he cried, humming for him whole movements of Mozart and Beethoven symphonies. His baby blue eyes gazing into hers, his whole face lit up in a smile of scrunched up crying. An easy birth, and as soon as she held his slimy body in her arms, knowing she would always love him. Stephen, her only child, her baby, boy, young man. Stephen, with his head of light brown curls, which had been mostly lost now to operations and scars. Only a few tufts remained, and she often ran her fingers through them and could not bear to shave them off, though he looked slightly ridiculous with his remaining scattered bushels of hair. She glanced at the timetable next to the door. Physio crossed out, another session cancelled, and gardening group in the afternoon. It was a group he seemed to enjoy, though she always found it tiring, steering his unwieldy chair between the 2 raised beds of drought-stricken tomatoes which constituted the OT garden. And then Stephen's right hand, which had once been known for his beautiful backhand on the tennis court, for lightly picking out the guitar bass line, trembling as he tried to get a grip on the miniature watering can, which was only half filled, his face all concentration and distortion, finally getting a few fingertips grasping the handle, while the young allied health assistant took most of the weight and guided him to sprinkle a few drops somewhere in the general direction of the plants. That's all he could do. Some of the other patients were able to, with the help of specialized equipment, pull out a few reeds, maybe 4 or 5 in an hour, with plenty of rests. This was a lot more than Stephen could manage. And still he seemed to love it, and Jeremy smiled, looking rather pleased with himself. It was a blessing, probably, and yet it also seemed the saddest part of it all to her, but he appeared to have no idea of what he'd lost. Thank you.
Mieta, come up.
Thank you. I've written a bit of a summary of what's gone before this. It's 1987 and 8-year-old Martin's ne'er-do-well Uncle Larry is visiting him and his mum in Sunshine following Martin's dad's desertion. But the visit's becoming an extended stay and Martin's mum is beginning to wish that Larry would go back to Sydney. Through his friends, Larry started getting the odd bit of work, a painting job here, a removalist job there. For a month he wore a hot dog suit and handed out flyers outside Wendy's, but was sacked for smoking inside the suit and burning a hole in it. Mum kept at him to get something more regular, so he went on the dole. He didn't get much though because he was living with us. It's catch-22, he said, and lent me a paperback when I asked him what he meant. I read the book, but I didn't understand much of it, let alone what it had to do with Larry's unemployment. One day, near the end of the 3rd month, I found Larry sitting at the kitchen table with a note in his hands. Next to him was a large parcel. "What's that?" I said. Larry handed me the note with a glassy expression. "It's from my housemates in Surrey Hills. My ex-housemates, apparently." "Hey, mate," it said. "Everything's fallen through. Becca decided to go travelling in India and only gave us a week's notice, and we couldn't find anyone to take over the room, so we fell behind with the rent. Then the lease ran out and the landlord evicted us and the real estate took all our bond for maintenance. Actually, we had to fork out a bit extra to fix that hole in the kitchen floor, so we sold your bed and your desk to cover your share. Sorry we didn't let you know in advance, but it happened real quick. Here are your books and records and stuff. Let us know when you're back in town. Cheers, Mick." Larry was still staring at his face. "Bastards," he said. I handed the note back. "At least they let me know," Larry went on. "I know a guy who went on tour for 2 weeks and came back to find all his stuff packed and out on the street and a Dutch backpacker living in his room." I stared gravely at him. I still didn't have a clue what was wrong. "Hey, forget it, kiddo. You want some macaroni cheese?" Mum took to leaving the employment classifieds around, strategically open at the hospitality section, but Larry refused to be limited. Instead, he signed up to an extras agency and started auditioning for roles in ads and fringe theatre. He also formed a band. He was always talking about his days travelling in America, before Sydney, before us. The people he'd met, Lydia Lunch, Richard Hell. He wanted to found an artists' collective, he said. A movement. How can I do that if I'm chained to a kitchen sink in some greasy spoon cafe? Mum pursed her lips and vacuumed under his feet. Thank you.
And Samantha-Ellen Bound, come up.
Didn't actually plan to read, so I'll just read the first couple of pages. Probably not the best parts, but, just leave you wanting more. All right. We come down to the river path where the mud has got all squidgy from the summer rain. The radio says there has never been a summer so wet, and a number of things have languished because of it. Potatoes, poppies, the Riverbank Regeneration Project, and the Exeter Downs Midsummer Fair, which couldn't go ahead because the oval got washed out. When me and Avery walk, the grass wants to hang on to our boots, and it's like the leaves are laughing at us, whopping us with cold drops of spit. Avery does a slide in the mud and goes lurching off into the dandelion weeds, and when he comes out again, he acts like he meant to do it. "Don't be such a sookie, Jessica Jo," he says. "Why can't you ever do anything exciting?" My name is not Jessica Jo, but that's what he likes to call me. There is a big streak of mud up one leg of his jeans now, a flash of brown against blue as he pushes past the vines and river moss. When Avery feels like it, he says a word or two, just to make sure I don't forget that he's the leader. "Over there, that's a river violet," he says. "It only ever opens in the morning." "All flowers open in the morning," I say. "You wouldn't know," he says. He's probably right. The only time I ever do things like this, like going to fish in the river, is when he comes throwing pebbles at the living room window. I don't think he understands about bells and front doors. Then I have to dig my old garden boots out from the stinking shoe cupboard and follow him. I don't know why I always follow him. Sometimes I'm not even sure I like Avery. There's a snub to his nose that just sets off something disagreeable in my guts. At school he thinks everyone likes him, and he walks around with the collar up on his jacket, looming over everyone like he's got a right to be there and they should be impressed that he made the effort to do so. I don't think anyone much is impressed. When he swaggers away, they all look at him like they just know he isn't anywhere near as big shot as he thinks he is. I'm afraid one day he'll turn back and see them, but he doesn't like turning back. Last year he took to chewing gum with one side of his mouth open, and Mrs. McConnell told him to stop being so asinine in class. He didn't like it much. He sat and snarled and dropped sly comments about her at lunch, and he found out where she lived and put a dead cat in her letterbox. I don't know where he got a dead cat, but I know he did because I saw him. I'm stuck with him, see, because he lives next door. His mum came to see my mum one day to ask her to a backyard gathering, and he looked at me from where he was kicking a ball and he said, "You're that girl." "Gee, you picked that well," I said back. My mum told me in a polite voice to mind my manners, but Avery stopped and the ball bounced away down the drive, and there was a look to his chin that said I had just issued a challenge and he would not be the one to turn it down. The first thing he did was take me to Mr. Hayes's down the road and put slugs from his own garden on Mr. Hayes' prize-winning roses. I didn't think it was such a nice thing to do, but I helped. And after that I seemed to pass his test and he made me his friend, whether I wanted to or not. I didn't really want to, but I was supposed to be minding my manners. There are things I don't tell Avery, like the way he tells me things. I didn't tell him that after we put the slug on Mr. Hayes' roses, I snuck back and tried to pick them all off. I don't tell him about the looks that other kids give him. I don't tell him that sometimes I give them too. But when he comes throwing pebbles at my window, I always come out. I'm not afraid of the pebbles, but I don't like to think what he would get up to if I didn't come out. Some people need other people. That's not me. I'm all right on my own. But Avery is different, and so I always go.
So there's a bit of a taster from all the stories. So if you haven't already got a copy, then you have to buy one to find out more. Okay, well, time to wrap up. I need to do my thank yous, of course, because a lot of people put a lot of work into this book, every issue, and they do it for nothing in return. And it's, I think, a very important book to be out in Melbourne to showcase new writers, and any way that you can promote it to other people would be great. If you're on Facebook, tell people about it. If you are bloggers, tell people about it, and that would be great. If you want to buy a T-shirt, buy one and wear it around. And then when people ask you what Untitled is, you can tell them. So, Les is the person who came up with the idea of bringing out Untitled in the first place. It's all his fault. So when I'm stressed out and I say I don't want to do this anymore, I blame him. There is an advantage to having OCD, and that means that all of this gets done because Les is always asking me, have you done this, have you done that, and he keeps me on track. So when people say that I'm organised, Les is even more so. Make sure you do read the editorial that Les has written, because it is a story in itself. I think it's funny. And it also shows what a great writer Les is. And at the end of the day, this is why we're doing it, because we love stories, we love writing, and we want to promote it. So thank you, Les. Clap. Of course, this book wouldn't look so pretty without the cover, which Kev Howlett, my husband, has done, again, for the fourth time. I I think it's gorgeous, and when it came back from the printers last Thursday and I took it out, I seriously was stroking it. I think it's gorgeous. And this is, as much as I will probably get an e-reader sooner than later because I can see a good reason for them, but I still love going to bed with a book. I won't say anything else because my son's here, but the hard copy, and it is, as Arnold said, it is a great size. My dream is to get it into the airports, and this issue is going out, is being distributed right across Australia, and they've said they're going to try and get it into airports for us. And I think it's a perfect aeroplane book. So the cover's gorgeous. Thank you, Kev. Bo Hillier over here was one of our interns. He's worked on past issues and obviously on this issue, but Bo really stepped up when Les and I were freaking out about reading all the competition entries. And we sent out an email saying, you know, are you available to read? And he goes, yeah, bring it on. And we went, thank God. Because reading 80 stories is a pretty big task. There were a lot of great stories, but there were some bad ones too, so I'm not being mean, but there's some that are quite hard to read. And some really long stories as well, because our limit was 5,000 words, and I don't think there's not many competitions out there that are 5,000 words limit. So thank you, Bo. Clap, clap, clap. Now, also, Bo probably won't be helping us out so much because he's taking over page 17. For those who don't know what page 17 is, it is another anthology, but it has short stories as well as poetry and articles about the craft of writing. It has been going for 8 years. Well, I think it's 8 years, but it's 8 issues anyway, so it's up to the 9th issue. And Tiggy Johnson she started it up and was running it, and she's moved to Queensland, and so she decided she wasn't going to do it anymore. So rather than see it just die, we decided to take it over. So our business, Busybird, has taken it over, but Bo is going to be running it. So he'll do a great job, we feel. So look out for, there's a competition on at the moment. I think Bo brought some competition entry forms. Yes, and there are copies of the anthology out there if you want to buy them, or if you even just want to have a look at what it is if you don't know. Laura Bovey, I don't know where you are, hello. Laura was our intern for this particular issue. We have an intern who looks after our mailbox for every issue, and it is quite a lot of work. They have to receive them and log them and read them and rate them as well. There's sort of the initial reader. So thank you, Laura, for all that work. And each issue, each issue actually we get more and more submissions every time, so it really is quite a lot of work. I don't think Marie-Claire is here, but Marie-Claire was the mailbox monitor for the competition entries. And, of course, when you run a competition, everyone sends everything in the last week. So, you know, we had 200-odd entries, so the poor thing, she ended up with a bad back. I hope it wasn't because of that, but either that or she just was trying to run away from us. But she's also helped us with another project that we're doing, and she's helped us do some editing on this, so thank you, Marie-Claire. Mel McClanahan up the back there. He's been a great advocate. He's been around with Untitled since the very beginning. He's very good at spruiking it, and he's always on the lookout for new interns for us. He's going to be running away, but we're going to still try and keep him on board if we can. So thank you, Mel. Laurie Steed. Laurie Steed helped us do some reading, and it was great to have him on the panel to help us choose some of the stories. Another person who's run away. Laurie's gone over to Western Australia, but luckily he had to be over here for Emerging Writers Festival or a few things? Yep. So that was good timing. I didn't even think about that. So thanks for coming tonight, and thank you for helping us out, Laurie. Jenny Chapman was coming tonight. I don't know if she is. I can't see her. Jenny did the proofing. See, there's so many components to doing all this, and obviously Les and I also proofed it, but sometimes we need other eyes to look at it because we read the stories so many times that it's easy to miss things. So Jenny's proofed this as well as the last issue, so thank you, Jenny. We have a new intern. Did Lauren make it? No, we have a new intern called Lauren Grosvenor. I think that's how you say it, Grosvenor. So she'll be our next intern for this issue. And I think that's about it. Les, have I forgotten anybody? Yourself. I'm not going to thank myself. So thanks everyone for coming, and there's a lot of faces here that have been to all of our launches, and I'm sorry, I have forgotten someone. Christine Zigomanis for bringing the platter of cheese out the back, at the front. And we have Mark here up the back. He's been filming tonight. He's come here maybe Christine twisted his arm, I don't know. But anyway, that's great. And my son Jack, poor thing, has to sit there and sell the books and act excited about helping his mum out. So thanks, Jackie. No, but seriously, these sort of things really are helped by the support they get, and I really appreciate all of you people who have been to just about every launch, and I really hope that we can keep going. So thank you. Sorry, I keep remembering things. We have to be out of here by 9 because we're paying for the time. So we still have about 20 minutes of drinking time and talking time, and buying books, of course. And if you haven't got a T-shirt, we have purple and black. And thank you for coming.